Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to explore something called conditional formatting. And what conditional formatting is a way to draw your attention to data that meets a specific criteria. And we do this by changing the way the data looks. We could usually do something like change the background color of a cell, or change the border, something along those lines, make something bold. As I said, generally the most efficient way to do it is to change the background color, but we want this feature to be dynamic. In other words, we don't want to have to go in and change the color ourselves. We want it to just change if a certain criteria is met. So we'll look at this, we'll do a couple of different activities with this. So here I have my data, New York Giants history as far as wins and losses from 1978 to present. And what I would like to do first is I would like to draw my, I would like to see instantly which seasons were seasons where the Giants won at least 11 games. So that's in the wins column. So I'm going to select the column itself, all the data in the column rather. I don't need to select the header. And I am going to say Format and click on Conditional Formatting. You can see that it's showing B2 to B42, which is correct. And I'm just going to, from here, there are some default options. So some of them have to do with text or even the cell itself, if the cell is empty or not empty. Some have to do with date, but now these down towards the lower end have to do with number. So I can say greater than, or I can say greater than and equal to. I am going to say, since I want 11 wins or more, I'm going to say greater than or equal to a value of 11. Now you can see that those cells they already look different over here if I scroll down. If I look over here, you can see that I have some formatting controls. So here I can say that let's make the background color a light green. We can bold the text that's in there. We could change the font color if we wanted. I'll make these a really dark green. I don't know if we'll even notice that difference, but I can do that. And then I can do things like italicize it or underline it. So some simple format changes here in the styling. And just say done. Now when I click off, you can see that those formatting changes are only applying to cells that are cells in column B that contain values 11 or more. Okay, so these to me are winning seasons. Now if I want to look at seasons, the worst of the seasons, what I consider losing seasons. So let me select the same data, okay, or the same cells, because I want to apply it to the same information. I can just add another rule. I could also go back and say format conditional formatting will bring me back here, but if I select those, it should show me the formats that already apply, and I can add another rule. So I'm going to say that same range of data, let's say if something is less than or equal to, in a losing season, let's call it 7 games. We could put anything in here, 6 or 5. You can see right now, well, first of all, you've got a lot more of those cells are flagged. And I'm going to change this to something kind of a negative color here. I'll call it a red. So you can see that those are the ceilings. And let's a little more selective. Let's say 6 or less, so really bad seasons. There's still a fair number here. And I can bold that if I want, and I could change the font color to a dark red. Okay. And there you go. Conditional formatting. Now, the last thing I want to show you is that the formatting doesn't need to apply to simply a column or a row or a single cell. It can apply to a range of cells that spans rows and columns. So in this case, I'm going to select all my data minus the labels, the headers up at top. And what I want to do here is I want to apply a rule, and I'm going to do it again with points. I'm going to say how many, which seasons did we score more than 380 points, or at least 380 points. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to highlight the entire row, not just the cell itself. So let's try that. So I've added another rule. You can see that the range is the entire range. And in this case, I'm going to have to scroll all the way to the bottom and put a custom formula in. So I can always write my own formula here. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the values in column E. So my first thought might be to say equals E2 is greater than or equal to 380. So this first equal sign is telling me that this is a formula. Okay, so I need this one to tell me it's a formula. The second is simply the formula. That's why these two equal signs can be confusing. The first one is just telling me that I'm using a formula. The second one is giving me the actual formula. E2 is greater than or equal to E380. Let's put a kind of a neutral color format on that, this light yellow. And if I do that, it doesn't work out exactly the way that I thought it might. In fact, it's not doing what I want at all. It doesn't really seem to make sense here. And the reason behind this is when you apply a formula, let me reselect so I can get my formulas up. When you apply a formula of any kind, it increments for the next row. So in other words, if I'm in this cell and then I go down to the next cell, it changes for the row, but it also changes for the column, and that's not something I really want. So I don't want this E reference. I don't want it to be looking for this 380 in B and C and D and all the way across. Where I want it to be looking for it is only E. So I'm going to put that $sign and make that part of the formula an absolute reference. And you can see that changes things completely. Here's 420, 380, 429. So these entire rows are years in which they've scored more than 380 points, or at least 380 points rather, because it's greater than or equal to. As usual, as soon as I start analyzing this data, I find some interesting information. So if I were to ask students to look at this, they could see that, look at this. There were years that they scored lots of points and had terrible records. And there were years where they scored lots of points, but they didn't have a lot of wins. As a matter of fact, look at these green ones with a lot of wins. In many of the years where they had winning seasons, they didn't score that many points. So that's telling me, at least for the Giants, I would make the assumption that very often the Giants are having winning seasons when they have strong defenses, when they're not allowing a lot of points, as opposed to when they're running up the score. And that would ask even more questions. Is this true around the league? Is this a particular thing that the Giants do? If I looked at another team, is it possible that they were more dependent on scoring a lot of points? But you can see, almost gives you at least a philosophy for the Giants when they're doing well. But anyway, that's conditional formatting. A little tricky when you're applying it to cells, when you're basing the formatting on the value in another cell. But just remember that you have to use the absolute references when you're doing that. That's the real trick there. Okay. Useful tool. You can use it to analyze data, and it's also something, if you've got students who are just a little bit older, even 6th, 7th grade, something that you can teach them as well.